Jack Thomas, a billionaire fraudster, is on trial in a New York court for embezzling money from struggling families. While Judge Karen Lee demands respect, Jack refuses to stand as she enters, showing his arrogance. However, this attitude quickly leads to a stunning downfall as the truth comes to light. The federal court in New York was filled with tension as the trial of Jack Thomas, a notorious billionaire fraudster, drew intense public and media attention. At 45 years old, Jack is a powerful man with millions of dollars in lavish estates. However, beneath his flashy exterior lies a ruthless fraudster who has swindled millions from struggling families and workers. Jack remains smug, believing that his wealth and expensive legal team will help him escape justice. Facing him is Judge Karen Lee, 50, known for her strictness and fairness. She has never allowed wealth or power to sway her decisions and is unwavering in her commitment to justice, regardless of the forces she faces. The federal courtroom in New York was packed, the air thick with the murmurs of the public and reporters discussing Jack Thomas's case. The atmosphere was tense, everyone eagerly awaiting the appearance of the key players in the trial. Jack Thomas, the infamous billionaire fraudster, had captured the public's attention, not just for embezzling millions of dollars from struggling families, but for his arrogance and blatant disregard for the law. As the courtroom waited, all eyes were on the entrance, particularly for Judge Karen Lee, who was known for her strictness and fairness. When the sound of the gavel signaled the judge's arrival, the entire courtroom stood up in unison to show respect. Everyone from the lawyers to the reporters rose to their feet to honor the judge's entrance. But there was one notable exception, Jack Thomas. Seated in his chair, Jack continued to scroll through his phone, paying no mind to the proceedings or the presence of the judge. He barely acknowledged the formalities around him, speaking softly to his lawyer, clearly uninterested in the gravity of the moment. A heavy silence filled the room as everyone turned their gaze to him. The contrast was stark. While everyone else showed respect, Jack's casual indifference was a slap in the face to the court. This was the first clear sign of his arrogance and defiance toward the legal system. The room was tense with disbelief as people watched, waiting for Judge Lee's reaction. But she remained silent, her eyes cold and calculating as she took in Jack's blatant disrespect. The stillness in the room only deepened the tension, marking the beginning of an intense showdown between the billionaire and the unyielding judge. Jack Thomas sat quietly in the courtroom, his smug demeanor and blatant arrogance evident in every gesture. Unconcerned and unafraid, Jack didn't feel the need to stand or show respect to anyone, even when Judge Karen Lee entered. He remained seated, eyes glued to his smartphone, smiling confidently as if the room revolved around him. Those around him could feel the overwhelming arrogance, but he seemed indifferent to it. Occasionally, he whispered to his legal team, treating the entire trial like a scripted performance meant solely for his benefit. As the trial continued, victims like Sarah Johnson and David Williams took the stand. Sarah, a widow who had lost her home and life savings to Jack's fraudulent schemes, tearfully recounted the agony of having nowhere to turn, spending nights sleeping in her car with her children. David Williams, a retired firefighter who had spent his life saving for retirement, spoke with a choking voice about losing everything he had worked for. Their stories were full of grief and loss, irrefutable evidence of Jack's crimes, yet Jack remained unmoved, his expression unchanged, even smirking at times. He felt no remorse, dismissing their testimonies as irrelevant details. To Jack, the suffering of his victims was nothing more than background noise. The pain and hardship they endured didn't faze him. Throughout the trial, Jack continued to sit, completely detached from the devastation his actions had caused. His unwavering confidence in his wealth and power kept him from acknowledging any accountability, treating the courtroom like an inconvenience in the grand scheme of his privileged life. Judge Karen Lee walked into the courtroom with a composed expression, her sharp eyes scanning the room. The scene felt like a prelude to a fierce confrontation. As everyone stood to greet her, Jack Thomas remained seated, casually scrolling through his phone, indifferent to the protocol. In that moment, the atmosphere in the room seemed to freeze, heavy with tension. But instead of reacting angrily or speaking out immediately, Judge Lee remained silent, her gaze locking on Jack with a chilling and authoritative stillness. There was no trace of submission or anger in her eyes, only unwavering resolve. The entire courtroom held its breath waiting for Judge Lee's response. Everyone knew she would not let this challenge slide easily. Jack could feel the tension building in the room, but he continued to act nonchalant, seemingly unfazed. However, the silent power emanating from the judge made everything feel more intense. Each passing second seemed to draw the attention of every person in the room towards her, and the air grew thick with anticipation. The silence stretched on, not because there was nothing to say, but because Judge Lee knew that sometimes silence holds the greatest power. She didn't need to speak. Her mere presence, her cold stare, and her unshakable poise were enough to create an invisible pressure weighing down on Jack. No matter how much he defied the courtroom's rules, Judge Lee remained unshaken. It was clear to everyone present that, for her, no one, no matter how wealthy or arrogant, could outmaneuver justice. As Sarah Johnson took the stand, her eyes were filled with tears, her face gaunt and weary. She sat there, her words choking in her throat, struggling to speak. Sarah's story was one of immense pain and loss. She spoke of the long sleepless nights when her entire family was forced to live in their car, with no home to return to. Those uncertain days, unsure of how she would feed her children, were burned into her memory. Everything she once had, her home, her savings, her family's future, was taken from her in an instant by Jack Thomas. The emotional weight of the loss was visible in her trembling voice, but her gaze remained determined, as if she were desperately trying to find hope amidst the ruins Jack had left behind. Next, David Williams, a man who had spent his entire life working as a firefighter, saving every penny to ensure a stable future, took the stand. But all of that was destroyed when Jack defrauded him. David recalled the dark days when he had no money left to pay for basic needs and had to share a room with his brother. His anger was palpable as he spoke of losing his retirement savings to Jack's schemes. The words were heavy with emotion, but his eyes blazed with fury. How could he accept the heartless actions of someone like Jack? Throughout Sarah and David's emotional testimonies, Jack Thomas remained unmoved. He didn't even glance up from his phone, continuing to scroll through it as though he didn't care about the suffering he had caused. His indifference was a slap in the face to everyone present. People began to whisper in anger, unable to contain their frustration. The tension in the room reached its peak, not only because of the heartbreaking testimonies of the victims, but also because of Jack's utter lack of remorse. Judge Karen Lee's gaze became sharper than ever, as though she could see through the depths of cruelty in Jack's actions. As the victims' testimonies came to an end, the atmosphere in the courtroom grew heavier than ever. The heartbreaking stories of Sarah and David lingered in the minds of everyone present, reminding them of the suffering Jack Thomas had caused. Then, the long silence was finally broken. Judge Karen Lee, who had maintained calm and composure throughout the trial, spoke, but this time her voice was firm and resolute, unlike before. "Defendant Jack Thomas," she said, her sharp gaze locking onto him, "please stand and face the witnesses, look them in the eye, and acknowledge the lives you have destroyed." The courtroom fell deathly silent. Every pair of eyes turned toward Jack, who sat unbothered, showing no sign of concern. He casually glanced at the judge's words, as if they were insignificant. A court officer moved toward him, preparing to help him stand as requested. But just as everyone expected Jack to comply, something unexpected happened. He suddenly collapsed, his head tilted to one side, and his body went stiff. A wave of dizziness hit him hard, causing him to lose his balance completely. Chaos erupted in the courtroom. No one could believe their eyes. Jack Thomas, the man they thought was invincible and untouchable, had crumpled right before the public's eyes. The one who had always exuded arrogance and confidence now lay motionless, sending shock waves through everyone present. Shouts for help rang out as court officers rushed to assist, but everything happened so quickly that no one had time to react. In an instant, the entire room was filled with confusion. People were left wondering, what just happened? How could someone so confident and powerful suddenly fall like this? The room was engulfed in silence, broken only by hurried footsteps and hushed whispers. It was a twist no one could have predicted. Jack, who had always believed he was untouchable, was now facing a situation he could not control. The price of arrogance was no longer just harsh words. It was a sudden fall that left everyone in the room stunned and unable to look away from the drama unfolding right before their eyes.